So you have a model helicopter, one that someone else has flown or tested for you, or you have a simulator, but you have no idea where to start with learning how to fly. Welcome to a new series on learning how to fly your model helicopter from the very beginning. In this video, we're going to assume that you have a helicopter or a simulator or something you can start flying with. Ideally, you want to be doing this on the simulator, especially if you have no experience with RC or flying. If you are going to do this at a club, you'll probably have to be on a buddy box with an instructor, and you'll have to abide by the safety rules of the club. So in this video, we're going to start with why we're going to learn tail-in hovering. We're then going to talk about some of the simulators like Heli-X and Next and the training facilities that they offer. And then we'll do a little training of our own on the simulator, and we can go through some exercises that you want to practice. We'll also have a look at the helicopter, and I'll show you what equipment I'm running. And then we'll go out to the field and we'll take all of those exercises we did on the simulator and we'll do them for real. So why are we going to start with a tail-in hover? First off, it's because the stick movements correspond to what the helicopter is doing. If you move the cyclic stick away, the model will move away. If you move the cyclic stick to the right, the model moves to the right. And it's the same with the rudder. Left rudder and the nose of the model turns to the left. So this is going to be the quickest way for your brain to learn that the stick movements mean these helicopter movements. Another reason is that once you can do a tail-in hover, which means you can take off, hover and land, it means you can get out to the field and actually start having some fun. So next we're going to look at some flight simulators and see what training they offer. Now Heli-X is one of the best flight simulators around, and it has a few decent training options. So if we go into training, helicopters hover training. So what hover training does is allows you to take control of just some of the controls and give other ones to Heli-X. So if we give Heli-X control over the collective and the rudder, for example, and that leaves us with elevator and aileron. When we go into start training, you'll see a circle. And the idea is that you just use your aileron or the cyclic to keep control of the helicopter and get in the middle of the circle. Now the rudder, although it moves, it doesn't actually do anything. And the cyclic, the collective, I'm moving the collective up and down at the moment, and then it doesn't do anything either. So I'm just keeping those two controls to keep it in the middle. So that, the hover trainer, really useful. So another training option under helicopters is the balloon training. Now balloon training is actually quite fun. Very easy, it's probably one of the easier training options. And balloon popping is actually quite a common thing at fun flyers. So what you want to do is just run your disc through the balloon. And we lower it, get that one. Oh, and we'll come back on this one. And at most of the fun flyers in the UK, you can see balloon popping. So this one's actually quite fun to do and quite easy. Another training option is similar. It's called cargo training. So this is where you have a cable that hangs under the helicopter, and the idea is that you just drag it over the ball and it'll attach automatically. And then when you go over to one of the landing spots, so you'll find a landing spot on the right and the left. The idea is that you have to drop the ball into the landing spot and it will disconnect automatically. Let's just try that. Oops. It's very difficult because you have to focus sort of partially on the ball and partially on the helicopter. So that one we got that one okay. And then you go back and you fetch another one. So good fun and not too difficult. So there's also basket training. Now basket training I find really difficult because you have to kind of drop it into the basket from above. But the idea is that you have a basket in front and then a basket on the left. And you've got some balls in this basket, and if we just drag the cable over, it'll attach. Oops, and it'll stay tail in because it's a tail in exercise. And this one's got a bit of weight, so it's swinging around and it's disturbing the helicopter. So if we just drop that on the ground, then go slowly over to there, we should be able to drop it in there. Right. So that's now in the basket. However, I haven't actually figured out how to disconnect at this point. So if one of you knows or one of you figures out, please let me know in the comments. We can also do cage training. So cage training is when there's a box on the ground, and then as soon as you lift off to a certain height, the box will start moving. And the idea is that you keep the helicopter in the box. Oh, it's gone a bit far. Let's bring it back. There we go. So the box will move up, then it'll move to the right, and then it'll start moving down. And this is pretty good in terms of you have to keep it within the box. The perspective on the model is changing. So you're now looking at the model slightly from below, which is what is going to happen in real life. And the box is now moving down. So that's an interesting one. Haven't done a lot of time on that, but it does look quite useful. Now the last bit of training we can try is no collective training. So this is where the model is actually fixed. So it's in a fixed position. You have control over the rudder and you have control over the cyclic. So forwards and backwards cyclic and left and right cyclic. And this is actually really useful in later exercises. But if you do get stuck or you're trying to figure out what the controls do, this can be really useful. So there I'm moving left and right, forwards and backwards, and then left for nose left and right for nose right. So that's it for the training in Heli-X. Let's go and have a look at the next flight simulator. So next is another excellent flight simulator, and the training options are actually pretty good. So if we press escape and go into training, one of the options is tutorial. So this is a tutorial where it'll actually lead you through each of the controls. And this is quite unique to Next. I've not seen this in any of the other training. So we've got to move the collective up. Now we have no control over the other options. So it's just that we've just got collective, we have no cyclic, and we have no rudder. And you can see that in the hover trainer on the right hand side, top right, we've only got pilot controlled pitch, everything else is locked. So if we move the pitch up, it'll go into the box. And once it stays there for 3 seconds, that box will disappear and you'll reappear lower down. So now we've got to lower the collective, get it into the box for 3 seconds, and then you get a new box on the left. Now at this point in the hover trainer, you can see it's now, you have control over the aileron. So it's AI controlled aileron, which means it's stabilized, which is not necessarily a good thing, but at this point it's actually, we're just learning the controls, so it's okay. So now we're going to move the aileron or left cyclic. And because it's stabilized, once it gets there, we just let the controls go and it'll stay. Now the box will be over on the right. Three seconds. And then we get the box on the far side. So now we've got control over elevator and aileron. So we want to get the model over into the box. And then we can just let the sticks go and it just stay there. And then we've got another box reappears and it's close by. And we're in the box. And now it wants us to learn how to do rudder. So if we just use left rudder, because the box is rotating counterclockwise, and oh, now it's going clockwise. So now we use right rudder. There we go. So that is the tutorial. So if we press escape again, we can also enable the hover trainer, which is the shortcut T. And that effectively gives us the hover trainer controls, which we had in the previous section, but it now gives us control over everything really. So it's still stabilizing or self-leveling. So you don't want to spend too much time doing that. And the reason that you don't want to learn in self-leveling mode is that the model is not going to behave like this in real life. No, you don't fly around in stabilized mode. So you need to get used to moving it back and forth and correcting. Now you can change that. So at the moment it's AI controlled aileron, but if we can change that to, let's say, a pilot controlled aileron, now it'll react like more like a normal helicopter. So if we give left, it'll stay left and it'll keep going, and it'll just get faster and faster. Then we have to stop it with right aileron. It'll come back the other way. So to get the model to stop, it's kind of this two-step process. You have to give right aileron to get it to stop, and then you have to give left aileron to just level it out. So the hover train is really good. This one's really excellent. So we turn the hover training off and we press escape again. And another training option is called the Pyro trainer. Now this is similar to the no collective trainer in Heli-X. So the model is locked in place, but you can control the cyclic, so forwards, backwards, left and right, and you have control of the rudder, and the collective obviously does nothing. So some really good training options in next. And this is a really excellent simulator, although it doesn't have some of the newer models which Heli-X does, but still a great simulator. Now, although AccuRC is a pretty good simulator, it hasn't been worked on for at least 4 years, and the training has fallen behind a bit. So the training, they do have some hover training for tail in, and if we start that, basically it just gives us a target to hover over. So the target's green, and then if you go too low, or if the tail goes too far to the side, and all you've got to do is you've got to hover it in the circle, wait for that training progress to reach 100, or complete the circle. If you go out of the circle, it resets to the beginning, so you want to keep it in the circle. And then that's effectively it. That's all the training they have, the tail-in training they have for AccuRC. So this is probably something they were planning on completing, but it looks at the moment, looks like it's not going to happen. Let's go and have a look at RealFlight. Now RealFlight has got some interesting options. We press Escape, go to Training, Classic, and if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we'll find Helicopter Basic Flight. So if we choose Basic Hover 1, it's going to teach us the controls. And in this session, an instructor is going to lead us through what all of the controls do and give us a demonstration. So if we begin.
Hello, my name is Brian Bremer. Today we're going to work on getting you up and hovering.
Thanks, Brian. So Brian's just going to talk you through what the controls do, and he's going to move the model from the left to the right. And if you do want to try it, there's actually, you can just click on Try It on the bottom right, and it'll make a helicopter for you. And you can try it. So there's no way of isolating the controls like in Heli-X or Next. So you can't take just control of the cyclic and let RealFlight do the collective and rudder. But it does have training gear on the bottom of this model. So if you need to land the model, or let's say it's moving away, you could just drop the collective and it'll level itself on the ground, which is the way we used to train before simulators. And then Brian will go back to talking. So if we just drag that to the end, because I couldn't find a decent way to skip, it'll then go on to the next session. So let's go back to the training. Now, there used to be some really good training levels on RealFlight, and I actually struggled to find this because this is RealFlight Evolution. However, they are still in the old menu system, weirdly. So if we press tilde to bring up the console, and we type in Show Legacy Menu, you will get the old menu from previous versions of RealFlight. And if we go into the training menu, they have a heli hover trainer. So here it's going to talk to you about what it's going to do. Basically, you have to keep the model inside of the circle, and here it gives you some more instructions, and we can just go. So there's the circle. We immediately need to bring it tail in. This is going to be a little bit trickier because we don't have the model with the training gear on. And the idea just seems to be that it's a circle and you need to keep it inside the circle. So let's see what it does when you go outside the circle. Oh God. Okay, so don't go outside the circle. If we exit that training, there's actually a really good training levels system that I used to practice with quite a lot. So this is the heli orientation trainer. And what it'll do is it'll show you a ghost or a shadow of a model, and then you need to take your model and put it in the same position. And once it's close, the progress bar will start moving. There we go. And then it'll move the model again, and you need to track it, and the progress bar will start again. And I find this is actually a really good way of training. You forget about what the sticks are doing, and you actually just focus more on getting the model into the position. And once you've followed this around a few times, it'll actually bump you up a level as well. So we're currently on 3 of 5. And once we complete this one, it'll take us up to level 2. Now, level 2, I don't think is going to be tail in. It's going to be a little bit trickier. It's really tricky watching the arrow key on the ground and the position of the model. Right, so now it's saying that we have to do it a bit faster. So as far as I remember, you have to do it quicker each level. Otherwise it times you out. In fact, you can see the timer counting down on the top right. So I've got 40 seconds approximately left in this level. I'm not doing a very good job. There goes the progress bar. I'm not even 1 of 5 yet. Okay, and these get trickier and trickier. So once you get past the tail end stages, it'll start doing nose in, and it'll change the heights as well, and it'll move it around. But I found that this was quite a challenge back in the day. I think I got up to level 27, and that seemed to be really difficult in terms of you had this tiny amount of time and you had to match the positions perfectly. But I find this is a really excellent exercise. So if we exit the heli orientation, so RealFlight has some interesting options. It's also interesting that they hide that menu and those 2 training options. So if you remember in Heli-X and Next, we had a way of locking the position of the model. This can also be done in RealFlight. However, it is a little bit trickier. So first of all, you have to press tilde on the keyboard to bring up the console. You can type in lock position, but you don't press enter on that yet. You actually have to fly the model up into a position first, and then press enter, and it'll lock the position there. So it's a little bit trickier, because if you do lock position on the ground, it obviously won't move it. And then now we can press tilde again and get rid of the console. Right, and there the model's locked in position, and you can use each of the controls to see what it does. So RealFlight has some really great training options, however a little bit trickier because you have to go into the console to get it to show the old menu, and lock position is a little bit more difficult to work with. So that's it for the simulators. Let's go on to doing some simulator work of our own. So let's now go and do some flying on the simulator. Now in this section, we're going to learn to keep the model in a stable, stationary position. And the point of that is that if you can do that, that means you can go to the field, you can take off, you can land, and you can do it safely. Now you don't have to do that. If you're actually capable of flying around on the simulator and you enjoy it, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you are learning in an instinctive way or very natural way where you just tend to fly and things start to come naturally, or you've got a little bit of experience with RC, which makes it a little bit easier, you don't have to spend a huge amount of time on this. But however, you will have to learn to hover, and hovering, I've heard said, is 80% of flying. If you can hover, you have control of the model, and the flying is actually the easy bit. So let's focus on just getting it to hover in a stable position. So the first stick movement you're going to learn is collective. So if you raise the collective up, the model should normally drift to the left. And now this is normal. It's because the tail is generating thrust. So it's going to want to push the model to the left. So when you raise it up, it starts moving left. The next thing you're going to want is right cyclic. So if you can figure out the cyclic, get the model to stop moving to the left, and now it's moving away, so you want to use the forward and backward cyclic. So now if we use back, right, forward, a little bit too fast, bring it back again, forward again. And now the nice thing about on the simulator is there's no wind. So each of the controls, you can use them, you've got lots of time, you can use them individually, and it gives you time to think about it as well. So we jab left, now we jab a bit of right, it's coming back towards us, so we're going to go a little bit forward again, too much, come back. Right. So it's a very easy way to learn on the sim because you've got lots of time to think and move. And you want to keep the tail pointed directly at you. And the reason for this when you're learning tail in is that at the moment the sticks correlate with the helicopter movement. So if you move the cyclic forward, the model moves forward. So it's very easy for your brain to learn. However, if you're not quite tail in and you move forward stick, you'll actually see the model goes to the left. So you need to keep the tail in all the time. And once you've actually managed to keep it in a space like this, you can see that there's actually very little control going on. So I'm not being worked hard at all to keep it in the center. So at this point, you actually stop learning. So there's almost no point spending more time doing this because you're not actually learning anything, which is why in the next section, we're going to learn all about creating movement. Now, learning to fly model helicopters can be really funny sometimes. You can be so focused on learning a new skill that you forget how to do one of the old ones. So in the previous exercise, we were learning to keep the model completely still as we can. And now what we want to do is introduce some movement. And it's almost a conscious thought of saying, okay, I need to push that cyclic stick to the right. And you give it the smallest of nudges. And as it starts moving, you want to get it to stop. And then we'll take it a little bit more right and stop. And a little more right again. And you want to do this in small movements of the helicopter, because if you just let it go, so here we go, left, it'll speed up, and at that point you can very easily make a mistake. So you want to keep it small, keep it still, make a small movement, model starts moving, and then immediately stop it again. And remember to keep that tail in, otherwise it'll affect the corrections that we make. So small movement to the right, and a little bit left, and level it off and keep it still. And you can do a couple of exercises. So we can do the star movement is a good one to do. So if we take off and we're in the middle, we'll first do a little movement to the left, keep a consistent pace, stop it on there, move it back to the center. Not too fast. Now we're going to move it out at a diagonal. So very slowly, we're going to stop it and bring it back to the center. And we're going to stop it there. And once you start doing these sorts of exercises, you'll find that it becomes very natural to control the model. You won't even think about it. And then we'll continue the star out that way. And anyway, you know what a star looks like, so or a half star, so we'll finish with that one. Another good one you can do is a left-right square. So we'll do a left, and we'll stop it. And then we'll take it all the way over to the right, and control that pace, don't let it get away from you. And stop it, and then we'll go up. Not too far, but just enough so that the perspective on the helicopter has now changed. So you're looking at the helicopter a little bit from underneath, which is more like when you fly in real life. Then you want to bring it over to the left again and get it to stop. Back down and then back to the center. And a third exercise you can do is a circle. So we're going to do a flat circle. So we're going to move it to the left. Then we're going to move it forward. And then onto the far side. And then we start bringing it back, go to the right, and then back to center. And you're looking to keep the speed of this very consistent. So shapes keep it interesting, and it gets you focused on the shape rather than actually the mechanics of what stick you're going to move next. So it's very good for taking your mind off that and lets your flying become natural. So these sorts of exercises, we're going to take them to the field. So let's go and have a look at the model next. So on the tail, I'm running some Azure 95mm tail blades. And then for the main blades, I'm running some Azure 560s. For the flight controller, I'm using a brand new V-Bar Evo. I'm also running a first buffer pack, although I am intending to replace it with one of these, which is the V-Bar Control Power Backup. For servos, I'm running a Theta THM 982 on the tail. And then on the cyclics, I'm running some GDW G50 servos. So these are mini servos on the tail and the cyclic. The speed controller I'm using is a Hobbywing Platinum 150 V5. So this will do 150 amps and peak at 180 amps. And it's also designed for 3S to 8S. And we're going to be using it on 6S. And the motor is an egodrift 4025HS 1050 kV. And this has been working really, really well. And for connectors, I'm using AS150. So these are anti-spark connectors. However, I'm not actually using the anti-spark because the Hobbywing has its own anti-spark built in. So one of the things you want to do after you've worked on the heli at home or touched the radio at home or done a rebuild is to do a pre-flight direction check. And so you start by doing a control check on the radio. So forwards, backwards, left and right. And then positive collective, negative collective, and right rudder and left rudder. So now we know the directions are correct. Now we need to see if the gyro compensation is correct. So we'll do the same thing. We'll tilt the model forward, the swash goes back, tilt the model back, swash goes forward. Same with left and right. And we'll check the rudder direction. So if we push the tail that way, it counteracts by going the other way. So we know those are correct. Now, the one thing people often forget to check, and this is massively important, who literally 10 minutes ago made this mistake after a rebuild, is you need to check the belt direction. Because if your belt direction is the wrong way on the tail, that means your gyro is going to go the wrong way. So for that, you just move it forward, and it shows the blades are going forward over there. Really easy mistake to make, and as we've seen, literally 10 minutes ago, got it wrong, and he's one of the top pilots here. Right, so let's go and do a hover. Right, so we're just going to go through the tail in hovering exercises. Right, so you just want to get it up in a stable hover, and after all that sim practice, it should be fairly easy to keep it still. And you can see if you move it left, move it right, back into a hover. And then you want to start doing those exercises. So first we'll take it over to the left, but we'll keep it tail in. Okay, and we got it stable there. Then we'll take it over to the right. And as I'm moving across, you want to move that tail rudder so it keeps it to tail in. You don't have to go a long way over, just a couple of meters back and forth. And then once you're happy with moving it left and right, then we can try the square as well. So get it in a stable hover, move it up a couple of feet, maybe a meter. So not completely odd angle to look at it, but it does change the perspective slightly. Move that tail, keep it tail in, and then move it across to the other side of the square. If at any time it gets weird, just bring it tail in, let it settle, right, and then take it back up to where you were. So I'm going to take it to the top, and back to middle. Right, and that's the end of our left-right square. So now we're going to take it down. Now, if you're very smooth on the way down, you're going to notice that the model actually stops about a foot off the ground, and that's because of the ground effect. So you actually need to lower the collective even more to get it to land on the ground. Okay, so that was a really long video just to talk about tail-in hovering. However, we did cover a lot about the simulator training and the basics of learning, so I can promise the next episodes won't be anywhere near as long. As I mentioned on the sim sessions, don't let hover training stop you from flying around, messing around in the sim and learning things in a natural, progressive way. The tail-in hover is important because you need it to get out to the field where you can take off, hover and land safely, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough so that you can get out there, and then over time it will get better anyway. By the way, one tip I have for the simulator is don't lock yourself in a room to do it. It can get boring very quickly. Do yourself a favor, put the TV on, put some music on, and it can actually be quite fun. The next episode is going to be nose-in hovering. We're going to discuss why it's the next logical step, and we're going to go through some very similar exercises that we have this time. If you think this series is going to help your flying, subscribe and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. Also, if there was anything you didn't like, let me know and I'll see if I can fix it in future episodes. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.